Number 1. My cousin and his family, wife, and infant son had lived in their house for about 5 years. His wife left home to drop the baby off at daycare before work, but she realized she had left her phone at home. Entering the house, she turned the corner to the hallway and nearly ran into the drop down attic ladder, which was fully extended. They never used the attic as it was filled with loose insulation, and my cousin had left for work hours earlier. She quietly left the house, drove around the corner, and called the police. When the police investigated, they found a short range transmitter connected to several cameras hidden throughout their home. The light fixture in the shower, the ceiling fan above their bed, even a pinhole in the nursery were sending videos to a nearby location. Their neighbor, a few houses away, had been given a key by the prior owners and installed surveillance equipment once he knew their schedule. My cousin's wife walked in on him, updating his equipment, but he forgot something at his house and left to get it when she walked in. He had been watching them for years. Number 2. True story about my grandma that takes place before they had children. My grandma, my grandpa, Daryl, worked night shifts, so my grandma, Dora, was home alone most nights. Her sister in law, Rose, would randomly come over to keep her company. Dora decided to go to bed early one night. Rose came over that night to see how she was doing. She went to Dora's bedroom after calling for her with the reply of, "I am in bed, just come in." Upon entering the room, Rose starts acting weird and telling her she really wants her to get up and come help her with something in the kitchen. Dora was ready to go to sleep and was already in bed and really didn't want to go. Rose was really adamant for her to come help her, telling her it was urgent. After a while, Dora eventually got up and followed Rose to the kitchen. Upon entering, Rose whispers in a panic with tears in her eyes, "There's a man under your bed with a knife." Dora, of course, didn't believe at first, but seeing the panic in Rose's eyes, she couldn't not believe her. They proceeded to call the cops and left to the neighbor's house. The cops came and found a man hiding in the closet with the butcher knife. That is the story of how my grandmother was almost murdered, and why I still, to this day, as a 30-year-old man, checks under the bed. Number 3. This is one my dad told me. When he and his brother were younger, they took a job to clean out some old lady's attic. The lady lived in a regular one story house with a normal attic space. The kind where you can't stand up fully, you have to stoop down and crawl everywhere. She had been hearing animals moving around and wanted some of her stuff pulled out of there before it got chewed up. For some reason, the attic only had one crawl space and it was in the living room, off to one side. So they pulled up a folding ladder, put it underneath, and my uncle climbed up and pushed the door up. He popped his head through, and the attic, dimensions of space be damned, was an exact replica of the living room underneath it, complete with lighting and doorways leading to God knows where. My dad was standing underneath, looking up. He could tell something wasn't right by the light and the way the roof looked too far up, like getting vertigo. My uncle closed the door, apologized to the lady, and they both took off. My dad said that his brother wouldn't talk to him until they were about a mile away. He just saw that look on his face, and when his brother said, "We've gotta go," he didn't argue. Number 4. I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up chopping and gathering firewood for my grandmother because it was getting dark. Driving back on a dirt road at about 30 miles per hour, I had this awful sense of being watched. Before I could turn to look out of my window, passenger side, my uncle quickly shouted, "Don't!" I completely froze. My heart felt like it was beating out of my chest, then completely stopped when I heard a tap tap on my window. My uncle sped up and was loudly praying in my native language. I didn't know what was going on and thought it was over till her truck suddenly dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying, "Look at me, don't turn away," over and over. Then I heard it again, tap, tap, but from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe and I wanted to cry. A minute or two passed and the truck dipped again. My uncle looked around and sighed. It was quite besides the truck and the road. He looked at me and said, "We will ask your father to do a prayer in the morning so the evil will forget our faces." The Vajra to English equivalent. I remember curling up on the seat and just staring at the radio, watching the time, listening to my uncle sing an old prayer till we got to my grandmother's house. Number 5. About 30 years ago, my mom went on a blind date. Her date took her to a restaurant, and although he was nice enough, she just wasn't into him. Not even halfway through the meal, she was already thinking of ways to leave early. The waiter could tell. While my mom's date was in the restroom, the waiter approached her and asking her if she was okay. She explained she was on a blind date and not having much fun. Turns out the waiter was just about to get off work. He offered to give her a ride home if she waited another 10 minutes. She considered it and was about to say yes when her date came back from the restroom. She gave a subtle headshake, no, to the waiter and smiled. She and her date finished their meals and he took her home. The next night, my mom was watching the evening news. A story comes on about a woman being murdered behind a restaurant the night before. The restaurant was the one she had been at. They showed the murderer's picture. It was the waiter.